Good evening. Welcome to the December 12th meeting of the Concord Select Board. Call this meeting to order. Remind everybody that our meeting is being recorded and broadcast. There's a very full agenda this evening, and before we go to the first order on the agenda, I want to just remark that later in the evening on the agenda we'll be receiving reports from two committees that the Select Board had constituted. And I just want to remind everybody, as we have at the last few meetings, that tonight we're going to be hearing from the committees on these two. We're going to be having the opportunity for the Select Board to ask questions with respect to the report that we received to make sure we understand it. And then we will be setting dates for the time that the board will actually deliberate on these matters. And so I'm saying that because what we are not having this evening is a public discussion of either as to events. Those are going to come at a pre-scheduled meeting, and I had informed committees of both of those committees about that beforehand. So the first order of business on our agenda is the consent agenda. The town accountant's warrants, minutes from August the 15th, September 12th, October the 17th, and December the 3rd. Gift acceptances from Florence Bottom Frame to Lynch, $2,000. Support the Beatty Center Dive Well Lift gift account, and Raymond Holland, $1,000 for the Beatty Center General Purpose gift account. One-day special licenses, the Concord Youth Theater on January the 7th, from 7 to 11 p.m. at 51 Walden Street, wine only, and a request to increase the seating at Barrel Farm.
Move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Is there any comments that the public wanted to make about this? See Mr. Barrel in the audience, I didn't know if you wanted to comment. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And do we have executive session minutes? We don't, do we? No. All right. Town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a few things to mention. The Comprehensive Sustainable Energy Committee is hosting a community fair on February 4th with a goal towards reducing Concord's carbon footprint, and they're looking for volunteers. Anybody who wants to help out with the event will be at the high school from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on February 4th.
Oh, Cooler Concord?
And it's called the Cooler Concord Fair, yes. A reminder that the town meeting warrant is open. The board voted at the coordination meeting on December 3rd to open the warrant, so articles may be submitted for inclusion in the annual town meeting warrant that are presented to the board by Tuesday, January 3rd at 4 p.m. We opened bids and have awarded a contract for the demolition of the house at 91 Sudbury Road. So I've signed the finance director signed the notice to proceed with the low bid contract, and it's expected to take about 10 days for the contractor to get organized. We just heard that the continued hearing on our Nagog Pond water filtration plant has been extended. It was scheduled for this coming Wednesday, and due to the wildlife study and other work that the consultants have submitted and the board requested additional time to review, it will be either January 11th or January 18th, so it's not happening this Wednesday.
What about their pledge that they would have a written report by the date that we had?
I just had that on my email when I arrived before the meeting, so I apologize for not having all the details on that. But I know some of you were planning to attend on Wednesday, and it's not happening. And then lastly, the closing on the Balls Hill Road land acquisition, the 80 acres, is still scheduled for Wednesday. I received all the paperwork. The Heaven sign's been printed out, ready to be signed and notarized. So I think we're moving forward with the land transaction on Balls Hill Road.
I think I have the responsibility to review that.
Yes.
So
Yep.
in the first thing in the morning.
Yes.
And then we can sign them.
Yep.
Right after I've had a chance to review.
Yep.
That's terrific. And
That's all I have.
is there a remark you were going to make about leasing?
So relative to the warrant, I was going to mention put an article together relative to authorizing the town manager enter to long-term leases and something we'd ask the town meeting to consider granting up to 10-year leases. Authorization of the town.
Delay in the Nagog Pond caused many problems for us.
The Public Works folks seem to welcome, the wildlife study just arrived this week, and the peer review consultant and others wanted time to review it. So they seem to be okay with one more month of extension.
Questions for the town manager? Chris, did we ever hear back from the owner of the Sudbury Road property? I know last time we talked,
We have heard consistently from the owner that he's going to make his own arrangements for a demolition contract, but he has not
it was
presented.
clear to him that once you had
Yeah,
accepted this sort of bids.
we're going to go
that
forward.
was the end of that. Okay, thank you very much. Ms. LaFleur?
Turn that mic on, Carrie, please.
Throw the coat on the floor. Yes, good evening.
The item I'm bringing before you this evening is a request to advance funds in lieu of borrowing from the general fund to the electric light fund in the amount of $200,000. Under Article 48 of the 2013 annual town meeting authorized the borrowing of $1 million for telecommunications services. At this point in time, the project is underway and we've expended some of the funds. We've borrowed some of the funds, but at this point in time, we've expended more than we've borrowed. The light plant operates on a calendar year, so it is getting ready to close its books. And it cannot close with a deficit in the capital projects account. At this point in time, we have overextended the amount that we have borrowed by $109,709, and there is an outstanding purchase order which may be expended before the end of the calendar year. We have borrowed $600,000, so we have $400,000 that is authorized but unissued. But based on the spending to date, I think that we only need to be concerned about the $200,000, well, what has been expended and what they have an outstanding purchase order. So we could do a short-term borrowing to take this into account, but there is a cost associated with that. It's about $2,500 was my estimate. But there is another process that's allowed under Mass General Law where we can advance funds from the general fund to the light plant as long as the money is repaid by the end of our fiscal year, which is June 30th. This project would be rolled into the 2007 bond issue, general obligation bond issue that we will be doing in April or May. And so I'm asking for your permission to advance the funds under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 28.
Any questions? Does anyone?
I just have a question. What we're having, this is a problem with timing, right? It's not a problem with revenue generation, or is it if we're not generating the revenue to support the borrowing?
No, it doesn't have to do with revenue generation, it's timing. So we had borrowed $600,000 on a $1 million project when we spent more than what we borrowed at this point.
And again, I'll just mention that we have 800 customers in for our broadband service, so it's been very well received. I think the money's been well spent, and it really is just a timing question.
Well, as a customer,
It's a fine product.
Okay, thank you.
So I would entertain a motion.
I move to authorize and approve a year-end borrowing for the CMLP broadband fund account.
Interfund transfer.
Interfund
From
transfer.
the general fund.
I move that the board authorize the interfund transfer of $200,000 from the general fund to the light.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. First. Ms. Goldsberry. Good evening.
Good evening. On behalf of the Committee on Disabilities, I am here to request that the Select Board vote support for the committee to have a warrant at town meeting to change the Committee on Disabilities to a Commission on Disabilities. This would give the committee, the permanence of being a commission. Most cities and towns in Massachusetts that have a group like this have a commission rather than a committee. It also would allow us to receive up to all, but likely some of the funds that are collected by the town for handicap parking fines, which the committee felt that could be used for educational purposes or perhaps to help fund a small project where something is needed for greater accessibility within Concord. I've had a conversation with Mr. Whalen about this, about that the amount of that would be a negotiation between the at that point, commission and the town manager's office.
All right, and as I think I mentioned to you when we had a chance to chat about this, knowing the complete implications of this is a little, I think, beyond where we are right now. But given that this is our last scheduled meeting before the warrant close, I wanted the opportunity to hear from you and to ask if we could assist them in developing a warrant article and submit it for annual town meeting, and then at a subsequent meeting in January or February, I'm not sure exactly when, we could have a full discussion of this. I think the two issues that I know about are, one, having committees have discretion over funds. And you mentioned that. The other is a commission is a state entity and not a town entity. And if the rules about what commissions do or don't do or should do or might do change, we would automatically as a commission have to be responsive to that, even if we didn't sort of like it. So I think the board wants to gather the facts up and have this as a regularly scheduled agenda item.
Certainly.
But certainly if the town manager can assist.
Yeah, it would be a matter of accepting the relevant statute, so it'd be a simple warrant article to draft.
Okay, so we'll do that, and I'll be in touch with you about when in January, early February, we might do that.
Great,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you very
Chairman,
much.
if I might just add, as being the liaison to the committee, that I think this issue arose when there was some frustration of getting funding for the BD Center dive pool, and I think the gifts, we really want to acknowledge how appreciated those gifts are and how much difference that makes. That had been an issue before the committee for over 6 months, and I think that that was kind of the root of this, that some type of funding or being able to solicit funds might be very beneficial for certain projects.
And another one we've heard about is at the train station, if there's
Right,
some kind
right.
of better facility for
Certainly.
disabled entry and exit off those trains, it would be
Yes.
appreciated. So we'll look
Yes,
forward.
and we did actually meet with
Yep.
Representative Atkins and some people from the MBTA about that last year.
Right, well, I'll make sure I be in touch with you as quickly as I can with the schedule, and we'll look forward to hearing back from you. And in the meantime, we'll get the warrant article prepared in case that's what we decide to do going forward.
Okay, great, thank you
Thank you
so
very
much.
much, and don't move.
I'm gonna get my notes, I'm gonna
Okay,
take
get
off
your
one
notes, you
hat
can
and
do
put
that.
on the other hat.
So, we ask you back up because this evening we want to receive the report from the Public-Private Partnership Study Group before. So welcome back, but just for the record, are there members of the committee who are with us?
Yes.
I mean, I know there are.
Yes.
But would you raise your hands? Thank you very much. So please.
Thank you, and I do want to acknowledge the committee. You have received a draft report from us, and this is although I speak about it, it's really the work of many people. The committee includes Abraham Fisher, Carol Aronson, Ingrid Detweiler, Miguel Escovari, Robert Graham, Dory Kehoe, Peter Mahler, Tom Rarich, and Tom McKean is our liaison. So I want to really thank the committee members for all their work. We have been meeting since May. We have had 18 meetings, including 2 public forums, so it's been a busy committee. And we do have recommendations, although the report does need just a bit of final tweaking. So we were charged to become knowledgeable about public-private partnerships, both in Concord and beyond, which we did, to solicit public input, which we did, to consider whether the town should make a process that would help the public-private partnerships be more transparent with information more available to the public, and to also think a little bit about financial impact on the town of P3 projects that sort of start one way and then maybe there's some additional things that happen. So we have basically 6 points of recommendation to the committee, that there be a standing public-private partnership committee, not this committee, but a group that's empowered to ongoing review public-private partnerships. That there be a dedicated staff person to support that committee, certainly not a full-time person, and we've talked with Mr. Whalen about that as well, how it might be carved out here or there, some hours from a current staff person's position. That the town manager or his designee be the gatekeeper for public-private partnerships and what gets forwarded to the committee with some specific guidelines of $150,000 or more in cost and or more than a year in length. That every P3 have a P3, public-private partnership, every P3 have a memorandum of understanding, even those that only involve a lease, so that it's really spelled out what the duties of each party are. That the committee review every P3 on at least an annual basis, and we've suggested quarterly standing meetings, and that 1/4 of each of the P3s be reviewed each quarter, and that if an additional meeting was needed in between, that could be called, because some new P3s might need more frequent oversight. And that efforts be made to use this within the town, but also to extend it to the Concord schools and to the regional school districts, so that there would be one process for both the town and the schools. And that would ensure that P3s get a thorough review. Your report includes a couple of flow charts, so those of you who are more visual kinds of learners, as I am, have this lovely flow chart. Yes. Well, we have to thank Miguel.
Because he knows for the designer.
Yeah. He did a wonderful job on both the one to evaluate and the one to monitor the ongoing P3s. So those processes are really sort of the guts of the report laid out visually. So the bulk of our work is completed. However, we do want a little bit more time to be able to just refine the document so that the final document that you have is succinct and exact. And we would ask that you allow us until the 31st of this month to accomplish that and get it to you. The committee has worked very, very hard to make sure that we could have a product that it meets the deadlines of the select board, and also it is very exact about what we think the process should be.
Well, first, before I turn to my colleagues here for any questions that they might have about this, I hope you will accept our gratitude, both you and everybody here and those members of your committee who aren't with us this evening. I know you worked hard on this. I know it's a complicated issue. And we're grateful to you for the hard work that you did, and we look forward to having a chance to discuss this in detail and then coming forward with recommendations around this work that you've done. So thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. Comments, questions from that?
So I have to say, when I read through the report, I was very impressed with the thoroughness in which you delved into this whole area of what is a public and private partnership. And I think that you've done a great deal of work. I really appreciate that. The flow chart for me, being a visual learner as well, really worked well. So I really appreciate all the recommendations here. I think the committee, our board, will have to spend a little more time with it, but I was really impressed with the quality and depth of research that you guys put into this.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Goldsberry. Thank you so much to you and your committee and for, providing the clarity of a very clear process for allowing the town to, fulfill our goals of providing a very transparent process in town. And this process will clearly allow that to happen. So thank you so much.
I very much enjoyed being here. It was an interesting learning experience.
It's been a lively group.
It was a lot of fun. I think the delays only caused that they had divided up the labor and now they want to have
Put
it
it
more
back together.
coordinated.
Yeah.
I don't think we're talking about any change in the content exactly, it's more the
No,
format.
it's not substantive
Yeah.
change, it's really edits.
Appreciate that, John. You do?
Well, I just think that tackling this in such an upfront manner is, it's one of the things that Concord does really well, is that, there can be tensions, there can be issues, and then, you delve in. And I look forward to spending more time with the report, both in its current form and its final form. And having gone to one of the public meetings, I fully appreciated the depth of everybody's efforts. Thank you.
Just a couple of very quick ones. Am I remembering correctly that you said there were on the order of about 30 of these?
Public-private
Is that-
partnerships.
am I remembering correctly?
In Concord, yes,
And
approximately.
I understand what you said tonight about a lease would, irrespective of the lease in and of itself, there would be a memorandum of understanding associated with it that would tackle the questions that you have
Yes.
raising back. But the clarifying question is, but not every lease the town signs is ipso facto a public-private partnership, right?
Yes,
But
not every
everyone that
lease.
is
Yes,
needs an MOU, right?
yes, yes.
And last, your remarks about Concord Public Schools in the regional district. The schools is one thing, because it's part of the town. The regional
Right.
district is its own entity, and so we have no jurisdiction over that whatsoever.
Right,
But as I mentioned to you at your public hearing, there is precedent from our Financial Audit Advisory Committee, which began just as a town function, and then we asked the schools if they'd like to join in, and they have. So I suspect a process similar to that would take place once the board's had a chance to review it and make some judgments. Then we could bring this to the attention of the regional district.
yes,
I'd be happy to
certainly.
do that.
And in a very brief discussion with Bill Fink, I mentioned this
Yeah.
committee to him and kind of what we were thinking about. And they're very busy right now, of course, with the superintendent search, but he said, maybe in February
Yeah.
would be a good time to talk with the committee.
Great. Any other comments, questions? Again, our gratitude and thanks for doing this on behalf of the town. We're grateful to you.
Well, I think we all felt like we learned a lot.
I'll tell you,
Yeah, complicated.
one of the advantages of being on committees or boards like this is you just learn a ton, whether you like it or not.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
thank you
so
very
much.
much. Yeah, I know
That
it
way
is.
we can get-
Well, what I'm not hoping, but what I'm suspecting is some of the public-private partnership folks might be leaving.
We'll be back. You need a drink of water.
And so there might be some chairs available here. I'm not trying to ask you to leave, but
Yeah, there were dozen people outside.
I know.
And then there was a camera.
Chris, is there any way we could get some more chairs, or is there a fun? Could we just put ourselves on hold for 2 minutes and run and go get some chairs?
Sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, I can get some chairs.
We'll get the chairs.
Just give us a minute.
Yeah.
Then they have to change the camera.
There's still a few chairs here, so please come on, I'd like to get back started though. The next item on our agenda is to receive the Estherbrook Woods Study Access Committee report. Sally and Polly, welcome very much to you both.
So Sally and I are going to present this report on behalf of our committee, and we have several members of our committee
Maybe I
here.
can get the committee
Yeah.
members to raise their hands too, please. Thank you. Thanks. 1, 2, 3. Yep. In the back, yes?
Yes.
Good chair.
So the Estherbrook Woods Access Study Committee is pleased to submit its final recommendations in fulfillment of our committee charge. The committee was appointed in April and charged with considering how to address the increased pressure for adequate and safe parking for the use of Estherbrook Woods trails, to review other impacts from increased visitor use, and to make recommendations to this board on or about December 1st. So here we are. As the select board members know, the Estherbrook Woods exists today as the result of an unusual collaboration with Harvard University, which established a 670-acre woodland preserve for education, research, and habitat protection in the 1960s. This was followed by the preservation of hundreds of additional acres of private land by generous Concord and Carlisle residents. In support of Harvard's teaching and research in the environmental sciences, zoology, ecology, and animal behavior, the towns of Concord and Carlisle and the Land Trust of Concord and Carlisle, private landowners, trustees of reservations, and thoughtful visitors have worked together for half a century to permanently protect and steward additional acreage on private land surrounding the preserve. The public is granted access to some, but not all, of this private land. What became clear to our committee is that managing increased public use of private land owned by numerous owners, including Harvard, is a challenge for the landowners and for the town. Our committee set out a goal of recommending actions that would help balance 3 objectives: stewardship of the woods for conservation, education, and research,
respecting the interests of landowners and welcoming the public. We held 2 well-attended public hearings, one in June to solicit ideas and the second in October, with the purpose of presenting preliminary recommendations for public comment. Following the second public hearing, the committee amended its preliminary recommendations in several significant ways, including a reduction in the overall amount of parking from the levels recommended in the preliminary report. One of the committee's votes in section 4D2 was not framed as it had been in our preliminary recommendations. The Select Board has received copies of correspondence related to this matter, and we wanted to mention it now again for the record. Although most of our recommendations were supported by the full committee, in one very important area, that of how much parking to provide in certain locations, we did not reach complete consensus. Our final recommendations are available on our committee's website and cover suggestions that the Select Board intends, as we understand it, to fully discuss at a future meeting.
So I'm just going to briefly, for people listening at home, indicate the major themes of our report. The first is to educate the public about the unique nature of the woods. There have been many misunderstandings and misinformation, and because of that, some visitors to the woods assume they're entering a public park or a dog park, and they don't understand the purpose of the woods, nor the rights and responsibilities of the private landowners. So we have a number of recommendations about the town and landowners working together to post informational signs that educate visitors about the unique nature of the woods, the ownership and purpose of it, and that same information be made available on various websites. Our second theme is to foster observance of guidelines that promote mutual respect. It was very clear to the committee that there had been too many visitors failing to treat the woods, the landowners, and other users with courtesy, and there have been clear cases of conflicts between owners and visitors, incidents of vandalism and trespass, failure to keep dogs under control, and dog waste left along the trails, just to name some of them. The committee in its report, has suggested a number of common courtesies that the community and landowners can embrace, including a limit on the number of dogs to 2 per person, dogs being under the owner's control at all times, dogs being on leash in parking areas and well into the woods, packing out dog waste, and the prohibition of commercial dog walking. We suggest that landowners and the community embrace these guidelines and work together to post signs and work with the police department, the animal control officer, and the Natural Resources Division to encourage observance of these common courtesies. The third major theme is to resolve legal uncertainties regarding rights of public access at the end of Estabrook Road. As we noted at the public hearing, the town and the Estabrook Road landowners have different legal opinions regarding the rights of public access to the woods beyond the paved end of Estabrook Road. Town Council's opinion is that the public has the right to access, while landowners believe that they control the access rights and expressly grant permission for the public to use the trail upon certain conditions. Property owners at the end of Estabrook Road have stated their intention to rescind permission for the public to use the access trail if additional parking is created or allowed along the public portion of the road. Uncertainty over this issue has made it very difficult for our committee to propose solutions to some of the issues that led to the creation of our committee. Our committee's highest priority, therefore, has been previously conveyed to you, which is that the Select Board work to resolve these uncertainties in order to secure permanent access at this location. Our fourth major theme is to improve parking at several locations in order to welcome visitors while providing safety, security, stewardship, and no undue burden on a single neighborhood. Perhaps not surprisingly, this was the area where our committee found its greatest challenge, and we did not come to full consensus on our recommendations here. In the end, by a majority vote, we recommended that the town and the trustees of reservations consider building a 16 to 20 car gravel or dirt parking lot at Punkatasset on the former Apthorpe land, now owned by the trustees. We recommend that once this lot is built, on-street parking be eliminated on Monument Street at Punkatasset. We also recommended some parking improvements on Lowell Road and Monument Farm Road. At the end of Estabrook Road, the committee recommends that space to adequately accommodate 11 cars be permitted along the public road, and that design improvements be done to make these spaces a little more accommodating while keeping the rural feel of the road. For some members of our committee, these 11 spaces seem like the appropriate number for the neighborhood and to protect the conservation values of the woods. For others, the numbers seem too few, and these numbers favored seeing if our educational and signage recommendations could lead to a reduction in conflicts that would in turn lead to a reduction of tension in the neighborhood and allow more parking to be considered. As we complete our work as a committee, we are struck by how important it is that the conversation about Estabrook Woods continue. There's much to resolve with our Estabrook partners, who include Harvard University, the town of Carlisle, Concord and Carlisle Land Trust, the trustees of reservations, landowners, and the public. And we have enjoyed working together toward the preservation of the woods, and look forward to having the selectmen consider these recommendations and take the next necessary steps.
Well, again, our gratitude. This has been, I know, a very difficult set of issues for you to consider and try to come to some kind of consensus. And I'd like to thank every member of the committee and a number of citizens and abutters who have contributed to the conversation. In some sense, now we have to actually deal with this stuff. So we're very grateful to you. I know it was a difficult assignment, and both of your leadership was greatly appreciated in addition to the
But we had a wonderful committee, and we also did have and there are a lot of faces here tonight who have come to our committee meetings and have expressed their opinions through writing and their presence, and all of that has really been appreciated and made our conversation rich.
I want to say, well, I'm greatly sympathetic to your issue of getting this legal matter resolved and how that issue would color what you as a committee could or thought you might be able to do. But setting it aside for a minute, and I know we can't in any real sense, but setting it aside, I think we have a common set of purposes that are not in conflict, and you've articulated them well. We have citizens whose property needs to be protected. We have a public who is entitled to access to those woods, and we need a behavior that needs to be reinforced so that we can conduct our affairs with one another in a manner that makes us proud as opposed to causes contentious attitudes in town. So I know I speak for the board, they'll speak for themselves, but that will be our intent as we move into this. And as I said when I talked to you earlier, I'd like to set a date for us to take this up in a way where we could discuss it widely. I would suggest our first meeting after the year, which I believe is January 9th, is that correct? But I have not asked you that before, so I don't want to sort of spring it on you, but if you could perhaps talk with your committee and let us know if that date would be all right.
You're going to discharge us tonight as a committee?
What we're going to do is we're going to go put this back in your court. No, I mean, I think what we'll do is why don't we extend your deadline for a day or so you could I just don't want to plan a date on the 9th and have it be the case that you folks have other business, have to be out of town and aren't going to be able to be here. So I'm just trying to be mindful of that.
So so I was assuming we would be discharged tonight, and then as members of the public, we'd be invited to that.
Why don't you do that?
Is that our? I just want to be on the same page as you.
Chat with one another and
Yes.
let me know.
Okay, I think that I know that members of the committee would like to be there.
Of course.
Certainly they will be there.
Members of the public too.
Yes,
So
that's right.
What I'd like to do is get this date set as quickly as we can so we can post it
Got it.
so that folks will know when we're going to talk about it. And
So we'll ask the committee
ask the committee and we'll
January 9th.
Let's aim for the 9th, unless you write back to me or call me or something and tell me that's not going to work. We'll aim for that, and we might not get unanimity of opinion, so that's just the way it's going to go. Other comments or questions from the board?
I would just comment that I think self-government doesn't always mean everybody's going to be in agreement. We have gotten letters and other reports from people who have other points of view on this, and I think the benefit of this type of committee was that it allows all points of views to come, and then our leader will just tell us where we're going. But no, seriously, I really think that this provided a wonderful forum to discuss what clearly was a very important issue and was kind of under the surface. So I think we've accomplished already an enormous amount. Whether everybody's going to be satisfied with the final result, probably not, but that's the way the world works. So thank you very much.
I would say one additional thing. Go ahead, please.
Well, before we close it out, I do want to, as the liaison to the Estabrook Woods Committee and as someone who is very intimately aware of how hard we tried in terms of forming the committee to make sure that as many of the viewpoints as we knew at that moment were represented. And as someone who made almost every one of the 7 a.m. meetings, I can only, once again extend the gratitude of the select board and of the town to the thorny issues that have been waded through and, civilly discussed, especially when they were points of passion. I mean, it's really, I'm always inspired because this is the hard stuff. Because it's the stuff that we care so much about. And I am, I look forward to the next iteration, and I guess that'll be on our laps, but I can't thank you all enough.
Let me say that we have received a very large number of comments from citizens. We've received some from people on the committee, we've received from citizens. If there's anybody out there who wants their point of view made part of the public record, please write to us. We have a binder that's been assembled for the select board. It's almost 2 binders full of material that we received. There have been public hearings, lots of discussion. I don't think the board is going to have an additional public hearing, but we'll certainly invite comments from the public when we get to it. However, I will say now and we'll say then, the purpose of citizen comments are not going to be simply to repeat what we already have heard from your committee or from the correspondence, so it's just going to be new information. So I would encourage people, if they've got a point of view, please get it in. You have our pledge, we'll read it, and we'll do our very best to come to a decision that will be what we believe to be in the best interest of the town. I forgot when the previous committee was here that I would like, with these folks here too, for you to authorize a chair to not just thank them, I've already done that, but to write to them with our thanks, and I'd like your authorization to do that. And also for the committee that was public-private partnership.
So moved.
With our gratitude and thanks, Sally and Polly.
Can I just ask, have we been discharged?
You are now disbanded.
Very much.
Rest in peace.
And then it's with gratitude.
Keep it well.
Thank you very much.
To all the committee, thanks so much, we greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. All right, the next order of business is an update on the Junction Village project from the Concord Housing Development Corporation and the Grantham Group. I saw Phil before, I don't know, is he out in the hall?
He was out in the hall.
I will say as a way of Phil and then Walter Ohanian from the Grantham Group. There we are, fellows. We've discussed this before a number of times. Perhaps we'll wait for 30 seconds. Just leave. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Nice to work too.
Thanks for coming.
Walter, would you pull that microphone over closer to, thank you. Good.
Thank you, Phil and Walter, thanks very much for coming tonight. We have discussed the Junction Village project a number of times, and I suspect this won't be the last time we discuss it either. It's also been in front of the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee, I don't remember the date, but at a Finance Committee meeting, they constructed as an official to say it was a subcommittee, folks who were interested in preparing a set of questions that they would like to have addressed. That letter was sent to me. I forwarded it to Phil and to Walter. Walter has responded, so it's Phil. The other fact is the Select Board has made it clear on a number of occasions, most recently at our annual town meeting preview on December the 3rd, our intention of putting forth a warrant article to support this project in the order of $1 million to be taken from free cash. The purpose of this evening's meeting, to which I have invited the Finance Committee, and I see a number of members of the Finance Committee, including Chair and the Chair of the Guidelines Committee here with us, and to be here this evening to discuss this. I'm hoping we get an update on where we are with this project, something of a timeline, and then be interested in entertaining questions not just from the Select Board, but from the Finance Committee and others who may have an interest. So did I miss anything on this up? Phil, you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the risk of repeating information that the Select Board already has, I think it would be appropriate for me to make some statements for your benefit as well as for the benefit of the members of the general public who might be here. The Concord Housing Development Corporation was created in 2007 by the town and charged by this Select Board to investigate and implement alternatives for the provision of affordable housing for the town of Concord. CHDC is a nonprofit corporation which was created by the town to provide the town with flexibility to act quickly should opportunities to obtain land or to acquire or provide for affordable housing become available. But our mission isn't limited to the small and quick response project. Our mission also has included fostering development of affordable housing projects like Lally Woods on Route 2A and the upgrade and preservation of affordable units at Emerson Annex. CHDC is managed by a volunteer board, some of whom are here with me tonight, all of whom are residents of Concord and all of whom are appointed by the Select Board. The CHDC has no budget of its own. It seeks funds through gifts and grants, and it's also provided with funds through the Community Preservation Act during town meeting. In 2013, after almost 6 years of effort, the Commonwealth transferred approximately 12 acres of land behind the Concord Correctional Facility to CHDC solely for the purpose of affordable housing and open space. No other uses are allowed pursuant to the deed and the legislation that preceded that deed. The transfer came about after many years of collaborative work between Concord's legislators, town officials, abutters, other residents, and the Walden Woods Foundation. We believe it's important to reemphasize the following facts with regard to the proposed Junction Village project so the public is clear. Any and all housing developed at Junction Village must be affordable housing. The land is permanently restricted by the Commonwealth for this purpose. Although different definitions of affordable housing could be applied to the proposed units at Junction Village, all of them are required to be deemed affordable. This is not going to be a mixed-use project with market rate and affordable units. The operator will not have the option to raise rents above the limits set by the town standards. There will be no multi-$100,000 entry fee, and no resident will be required to leave if his or her assets fall below a required minimum or in fact even exhausted. Here's where the rubber hits the road. Based on the current pace of housing development, Concord will fall approximately 20 to 30 units short of our state-mandated 10% units are added to the subsidized housing inventory. The proposed affordable units at Junction Village would provide 83 SHI countable units by 2019, before the next census. Our mission is to create affordable housing. I think that's a goal that all of us support, that the entire town supports, and whose merit is self-evident. However, our mission also supports the goals and objectives of the Select Board and the Planning Department to maintain our independence and control over poorly planned development within the town which might arise under Chapter 40B. As members of the Select Board recall, CHDC appeared before it in May 2015 to provide an update on the progress made in connection with the Junction Village project. I've asked the town manager's staff to provide you with a copy of the update. Hopefully that made its way post-packet to your table. I'm not going to rehash the entire content of that document, but I'll state that the facts that were true in 2015 remain the facts today. In May 2015, the Select Board unanimously supported our efforts to create an affordable assisted living project at Junction Village. The Select Board agreed that this was an important and appropriate project in light of our need to maintain our zoning independence. And in light of the fact that in May 2015 a funding gap had appeared, the Select Board appointed a committee to investigate how to fill that funding gap between the time that the project was to be permitted and its likely construction prior to 2019. The committee was appointed by the Select Board. It was assisted by the former Finance Director, Tony LaGalbo, and consisted of several longtime Concord residents who made recommendations that the funding gap be filled by a combination of free cash, Community Preservation Act funds dedicated over several years, funds obtained from the Metro West Home Consortium, and fundraising at a significant level by the Concord Housing Foundation. Since the spring of 2015, I'm pleased to report, and as you know, the Grantham Group has been awarded a project eligibility letter by the State Department of Housing and Community Development to apply for federal low-income housing tax credits. The CHDC has continued its outreach to the public through means of an open space workshop, outreach to local groups such as the West Concord Advisory Committee, work with our legislative delegation to continue to find support at the legislative level, and with Concord's most excellent planning staff. As you know, Grantham Group has submitted permit applications to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and that process will commence shortly. The public will have ample opportunity to ask questions and review the details of the proposed construction in the usual public process before the Planning Board, the Zoning Board, and the Natural Resources Commission. We're confident that this proposal makes sense for the town of Concord and that it represents good planning and prudent fiscal management. In the meantime, the volunteer members of CHDC will continue their earnest efforts to address each and every question raised about the wisdom of this undertaking, the benefit to seniors and their families living in our community, and the prudence and, in fact, the necessity of using town funds to support this initiative at public forums like this one, at public forums before the Finance Committee, as well as in the zoning process. Mr. Walter Rohanian, the Grantham Group, is with me to make a presentation about the financial details of the project and to provide further information above and beyond what's already been provided in the written materials presented to you. Those materials were prepared by Grantham in response to the Finance Committee's letter in October and submitted to you in November. There are a few items before I move on that I would like to specifically address so that you and the public have heard this once again. The first is, will there be a Concord preference? Yes, the developer has committed to providing a local preference during the initial rent-up of the affordable assisted living project and has agreed that that commitment may be made a condition of the grant of the permit by the zoning board. They're committed to it. Does Concord need affordable assisted living? Yes. According to the 2015 Housing Production Plan, which was prepared on behalf of our planning department, the fastest growing segment of our population is people over the age of 65. And within that segment of the population, persons over the age of 75 is growing most rapidly. Almost 66% of Concord residents over the age of 65 would qualify for affordable housing in Junction Village. I want to point out that Concord Park, the assisted living facility in West Concord, offers just 18 affordable units. There are no other affordable assisted living facilities within the town. The housing production plan notes that there are only a few other affordable assisted living facilities within the region that offer this type of affordable assisted living. Affordable assisted living in this location is an appropriate and reasonable use for the 12-acre parcel that we were granted by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It will have minimal impacts on traffic congestion, no impact on the school population, and a positive impact on our tax base. There have been questions raised about why a for-profit company was being utilized instead of a nonprofit. I can tell you with confidence that many affordable housing developers are classified as for-profit, and the profits in any affordable housing development are controlled by the Massachusetts general laws and overseen by the Department of Housing and Community Development. Grantham was chosen by CHDC because it has a proven track record of constructing and operating successful projects throughout the state. Grantham recently partnered with the State Mass Development Finance Agency in Northampton, and they've opened a facility there. They're undertaking a second project at another state facility in Belchertown. They have 4 other projects in various municipalities in the Commonwealth. They are a success story. They have been awarded an award by our Housing and Community Development Department because they get the job done. That's why they were selected. I want to reemphasize to the board and to the members of the public that this project is going to be affordable in perpetuity. The affordability component will never run out because it's controlled by the deed. Will Grantham own the land? No. They'll be provided a ground lease, and the balance of the land will continue to be owned by CHCD. We've been asked why Winthrop Street was used as the access point and why the roads to Route 2 cannot be used. I will tell you that there is no other access other than Winthrop Street to this site. I can tell you that we have been asked to reach out to the Department of Correction and Department of Transportation to attempt to arrange temporary construction access. We have not received responses from either of those agencies, and today, again, I reached out to our legislative delegation to provide us with assistance to see if that's even a possibility. Before I close, I want to try to address why Concord has been asked to come up with additional funding for this project and why the developer simply can't put more money into the project. Affordable assisted living is not a financially feasible project without a local match. Municipalities throughout the Commonwealth have provided assistance, and in fact, the State Department of Housing and Community Development has an expectation that any project financed with low-income tax credits will be met with a local match in order to award the credits in the first place. The information in your materials makes it clear that on a per-unit basis, the Junction Village project is a substantially less and expensive and more on a per-unit basis cost-effective means of developing affordable housing than quite a number of other comparable projects undertaken recently in Newton, Needham, Sudbury, and Brookline. So, for example, in Pearl Street in Newton, the per-unit subsidy was almost $381,000 for each affordable unit developed. In Sudbury, the per-unit subsidy was over $68,000 per unit developed. Junction Village, assuming a $3 million local match, which is above and beyond what is currently proposed, would be about approximately a $36,000 local subsidy. I'd like to say in closing that pursuing affordable housing projects is never easy. There will always be people who want something different. There will always be people who object to one detail or another. However, we believe that this is an important project, one that will pursue worthy goals in and of themselves, and also the worthy goal of providing our independence from Chapter 40B. We ask for your continued support, and we look forward to answering any questions that you may have this evening. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Walter.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone, for meeting with us tonight. So one of the first things I've been asked to speak about tonight was just kind of where we've been over the past few months, and I'd like to give an outline as to what's been done since we actually filed the project eligibility letter. So in August of 16, we received the project eligibility letter from the Department of Housing and Community Development, and this allowed us to proceed with the formal ZBA application with the town, and also file a one-stop for the tax credits with the Department of Housing and Community Development. Once we received that project eligibility letter, in September of 16, Grantham and the Concord Housing Development Corp met with Town Planning Division to discuss the site layout in terms of the site layout feedback that the planning board had given some concerns on how the building was being laid out. So we took a detailed approach to show the planning division how we were able to situate the building on the site. What we had to do is to make sure that we looked at the building orientation and the site setbacks due to the proximity to the prison. Grantham also incorporated the West Concord design guidelines into the development. And the design items considered were the design itself, sustainability, LEED rating, signage, parking, minimizing the parking, also the light plan to make sure that all fixtures are dark sky compliant and that there's no light pollution. After we took into consideration the feedback that we received from the planning division, in October of 16, Grantham released its civil engineers to continue with the drawings to incorporate the planning division's comments. In November of 16, Grantham met with the National Resource Commission to review the project as a portion of the road is within the 100-foot wetland buffer zone. None is in the wetland itself and none within 25 feet. Part of the problem that we have is you go down Winthrop Street, there's only that one access easement that you have to be able to get into the site over the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And if you were to continue to go straight, you would be 100% into the wetlands if you wanted to place your building there. So you have to come up and then take a left. And where that road bends is where it would fall slightly into that area. On December 1st, we filed an application for a comprehensive permit with the ZBA. And the reason for the comprehensive permit was for height, use, and minimum lot frontage. And then we also filed a notice of intent with the NRC. So where are we going? December 15th, this Thursday, we're filing a pre-application with the Department of Housing and Community Development. And that will allow the state to see the project and determine whether or not it can actually file for a tax credit application this round. What they look for is making sure that the projects are quote-unquote shovel-ready and making sure that the project can proceed if it's awarded credits. One of the things that was important to us was to make sure that we filed for that comprehensive permit to show them that we have a plan to get zoning in place, and that there's also a plan to be able to get the funding that's needed for this project. Assuming the HCD allows us to apply for the tax credits, we will file a formal one-stop application in February and anticipate to hear sometime in the early summer of this year. A project of this size and magnitude, which is consistent because which I think I've mentioned to the board before, for every dollar of tax credit that's out there, there's $10 chasing it. There's projects that didn't get awarded last time that will be going in a second time and some for a third time to receive funding. My assumption is a project of this magnitude will take 2 times to be able to receive its funding. Assuming that's the case, we'd apply again towards the end of the year and hopefully have an award in the summer of, or this spring of next year. assuming we have a June of 18 award, we would it would take about a year to build, and we would open in November of 19. So in the coming weeks, we have a meeting with the West Concord Advisory Council to update them on the project. We have a meeting with the planning board on January, I think it's 10th or 12th. And then the second potential meeting with the planning board 2 weeks later. And then from there, we anticipate being on the February Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. In closing, just like Phil had mentioned, 100% of our units do count towards the town subsidized inventory, which is important, obviously, all 83 units. Our company's been doing this for 20 years. We currently are serving 6 communities, and we're about to break ground actually in our 7th community this spring. We were awarded tax credits the last go-around. We have a very good reputation with the Commonwealth. We were just awarded a citation by the governor for our work in affordable housing. We serve over 450 residents, and we employ over 250 people, all within the state of Massachusetts. If this is a project that is able to proceed and is able to move forward, I think it's something that the town will enjoy for the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, questions first from the board?
Well, there's been quite a bit of progress since we last talked to you. It's great to
Thank
hear
you.
that it's moving ahead. So what's needed from this board tonight?
Well, I think what I was interested in was a couple of things. One, what we've heard is an update. It's been a while since we've heard from you, and we wanted to find out where the project stood. I think we also wanted to give the Housing Corporation an opportunity to just sort of lay out the case, if you will, again, for the project. Third, whatever issues we might have here, and then, as I said, the Finance Committee had written to us, and we had forwarded it onto Walter and to the Housing Corporation, and I've invited them to be here, so they may have some questions.
The committee from the Finance Committee, the subcommittee, when they received their response, has there been communication back and forth regarding that response?
So the response was submitted November 20th? Yeah, I think it was November 20th, and I believe, Phil, you correct me, I think we've reached out to see whether or not we should be on an upcoming meeting for them, and I apologize, I didn't realize the Finance Committee would be having questions for this evening, and I will do my best I can to answer anything that they might have. I thought we'd have
I thought that the questions were good, the answers were very good. I'm not sure whether the public is aware of a lot of the answers.
Yeah.
My sense, I have one particular question,
Sure.
which is, how many of the 83 units will get Concord preference?
So it's 70% of the affordable units. So out of the 43 units that are affordable, it will be 30.
30 units, okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of lack of information in the public.
Yeah.
And my concern is, we just had a special town meeting where Black Birch project did not receive the approval of the town meeting. And we can make our recommendations or whatever else, but I do think that the public is going to need to get a lot more input and information. I would urge you to perhaps even publish your letter in the Concord Journal, your response to the Finance Committee, because I think it did address what would happen. You know, there was an issue of what would happen if Grantham went bankrupt.
Sure.
And, you know, but people are concerned. I mean, I think perhaps real estate developers may not have the highest reputation today that they might have had a few years ago. I think everybody is in favor of affordable housing.
Sure.
But there is this notion that, you know, how come we're having a for-profit? Now, one of the advantages is we get tax revenue from it.
Right.
And my understanding that it would be about $40,000.
So the project is committing to about $75,000 towards the town of Concord, and that is divvied up in a few ways. Some of it will be tax revenue, some of it will be the ground lease. So just to answer your question on the bankruptcy, the town doesn't assume any operational bankruptcy liabilities of the project. The project is owned by a limited partnership.
Your letter explains that.
Exactly.
And it was
If there is a
very useful,
default.
But as I say, in communicating with the public, you know, I don't have all the answers. Housing is not a simple matter.
Sure.
The funding of the housing, the tax credits, the various parties that are involved in it. You've got state, you've got federal, you've got local, you've got various committees. And I know you're all doing your best to get the information out in pieces. I would love to see perhaps just an open meeting where the public can come and ask any questions and you do your best to answer them. I think it would go to reassuring people that this is a very valuable project and needs the public support. But if we had all the boards were in favor of the other development, and as I say, the public didn't follow along. So
Thank you.
I think we've got an uphill battle, frankly.
Let me ask you a pointed question before. Do you think then that it would be our place to have a hearing?
And I don't think we necessarily, I mean, I feel I've gotten, because of the information, we get the information, and it's very useful. I think the part of the problem is that what we get, the general public doesn't necessarily get.
No, I was just asking if you thought there should be a public hearing, should it be under our auspices that we would convene it?
I defer to your judgment on that.
I don't have any judgment.
Sorry.
It would seem appropriate for us to host a public, I would call it a meeting, not a public hearing, because it wouldn't be a formal process. So I could see that the select board would host a public meeting to discuss the status of the Junction Village project.
I'd be a little, I think, I hear that, but I'd be a little sensitive to not getting in the way of the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, because they've got sort of statutory responsibilities to deal with some things.
All those meetings are public.
Yeah, but I think the notion of having something that is public, now it's a capital P, but I think is a good, I think is a.
Sure, back probably 2 years ago, CHDC hosted an open, at the Harvey Wheeler Center, I would say an open workshop, but an open forum that we had presented about the project, what it entailed.
This autumn we did it.
Right.
We had a walkthrough and that was very educational, but there wasn't quite as many. I think people are now getting a little more focused on it, and the notion of $1 million of the free cash has gotten people's attention.
So I can tell you that I did speak with the chair of the West Concord Advisory Committee, Mr. Ursa, and our original conversation was maybe we should have about 20 minutes of discussion at WCAC. But we are now going to be on the agenda in January, so that's 2.5, 3 weeks away. And I certainly think that might be an opportunity to open up this process. I can speak with Mr. Ursa and see if he and his committee members are comfortable with having a more expansive discussion and leaving some more time for discussing the project. And then you could report back through staff or directly to the chair as to Mr. Ursa's comfort in terms of a somewhat expanded forum for discussing the project.
You might also talk with the League of Women Voters. I know they've got, they routinely hold forums where people get a chance to discuss things. And, I suspect they have a point of view about this.
That seems to be the case with leagues. So.
Might be a good group too. I would also, just in the presentation you made, Phil, you made reference to the comparative cost, the per-unit comparative cost with the number of other projects in other towns, Newton, Sudbury, Needham, and all that. But I think I would also point out that even with projects inside the town, on a per-unit basis, this is relatively, and it's a big number. The 3 million is a big number. but on a per unit cost, even within town here, it's relatively, it falls down to the bottom of the.
I think that's a very fair statement, and while we're here, we might as well just lay it out in terms of presenting the case. So the last project that we undertook to buy down the sale price of a house, which was located at 1818 Main Street, so that's in West Concord, and the idea there was that that project included a Concord affordable unit, but it was not a unit that would qualify for inclusion on the SHI because its sale price was too high. So in order to buy down the cost of that house, CHDC contributed $92,000 directly to the developer in order to lower the sale price and have it qualify for the SHI. So you know that's the kind of activity that CHDC was originally conceived, and you know a number of the housing advocates have asked us to do that. So when there's an opportunity to buy down the sale price of a house or to actually buy a house, we would inject funds in order to pursue that project. But it does give you an idea of the scale of funds used to buy one affordable unit, $92,000. This would be a contribution.
Well, luckily here, the land is free, you know.
Right, the land is free. It's required to be used as affordable housing, and at least in this case, we have a project that makes sense for this particular parcel of land that's located adjacent to the prison. We did go out, and just to remind folks of our process, originally CHDC had conceived of this project as a family housing project. And we went out to the public and we got feedback that family housing was not desirable for this location because of quite a number of reasons, including the traffic impact and the fact that this might not be the most, family housing might not be the most appropriate land use for a lot that was adjacent to the prison wall. So, you know, we have a different approach that really doesn't have substantial traffic impacts. Affordable, assisted living projects don't have the peak hour impacts at all. You know, you have a population that I think is probably going to be more comfortable given the proximity to the adjacent land uses.
And I think as mentioned earlier this month by Charles Phillips at Concord Housing Foundation, you know, there's, when you're seeking to make an embedded home in a neighborhood or an existing home in a community affordable, he was mentioning, you know, monetary magnitude of, you know, $300,000 to $500,000 for a pay down. So, and even though the land is free, I mean, I think in this particular model, the offering of units at the 30% of household annual income is that's 17 units at 30%, which is probably just around that Social Security line. So you're getting that, and that would be offering folks that type of an opportunity, and then it goes up from there, but 60% and then up to about 150. So
Concord has not been under the thumb of 40B, and I think that people may not appreciate kind of the benefit of not being under the thumb. And I think that's one of the sale pitches that has to be done is why this is so important to be able to satisfy that. Because we've had the luxury of not having neighborhoods, you know, in some ways disrupted by somebody coming in and exercising that power.
Well, I also think that as a former member of the West Concord Advisory Committee, when this project in various iterations came into West Concord's discussion, the more you can do to educate that community. I mean, we're one town, but there's a sense in West Concord of a lot of impacts of a lot of different things. There's been a lot of development in the village center, and some of that pushback is what you're feeling. And I think the more the facts can be gone through again and again and again, because I also, going to Tom's point about the thumb of 40B, I wouldn't want to know where that thumb would come down on us either. And I think everybody needs to be thinking about the bigger picture here, not just the fact this would serve an entire population of Concord and others who have, clear and critical need, and as our housing production plan demonstrates. But it solves a lot of our potential future problems.
So, just as the follow-up to that, I'll contact Steve Urza tomorrow, ask him if, this is an opportunity, the meeting in January is an opportunity to open it up. I can say that fortunately I get to walk to the meetings in West Concord because that's where I live too. And I certainly understand and have, clear experience with people's concerns about traffic and congestion in West Concord Village, so I get it.
Other questions from the board? For me, it's a strategic question in some sense. Can the town meet its affordable housing goals? And the reality is we just have a few years to get this job done. And while I'm very supportive of the notion of embedding units wherever we can around town, I thought, I had heard that we were closer to 40 units short, but whatever. Doing that on a one off, two off kind of thing over the very short period of time between now and 2020 seems like a daunting task. This becomes of real, I think, long-term importance to the town. Let me turn to Ms. Miller. Entertain you or members of your committee if you have questions that you'd like to ask.
Well, I know that we will have at some point.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Sorry. At some point, we are planning to have speakers present again to the Finance Committee. I don't want to hijack your proceedings with lots of decimal points here. So, but nonetheless,
I would just say that well, I don't know whether Walter will know or not, but the Finance Committee's been a little preoccupied with setting the guidelines for the town over the course of the last 6 or 7 weeks. So now that they've more or less accomplished that task.
But nonetheless, I would agree the Finance Committee, given the magnitude of this project in terms of the town budget, it places great importance on getting our questions answered, and we have received answers from them. I don't know if there are any pressing questions that the Finance Committee has at this moment. Yeah. Yes, and we are here in full force in terms of the study group that looked at the proposal, but I think our... Sure.
Thank you very much for the clear and thorough response to our questions.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. I think one of the important things also is that since it is kind of what they call a friendly 40B action, I think we should try to make sure we provide the FinCom subcommittee with as much expertise, consultant information as we can in terms of projects that are similar to this. So as I mentioned in the past, recent past, that I'm sure there's development folks in Concord who could probably shed some light on how the process works with mass development, et cetera. So. I think there's some folks on the CHA that also have some experience with that. So if there's any questions with that, I think we could all kind of join you in your meeting next time through and, kind of help clarify.
So I just wanted to add one small comment, and that's about the town's intent on meeting affordable housing goals. The goal is not to avoid 40B as much as it is to provide diversity in our community, because diversity makes us a better, stronger community. And so we shouldn't be phrasing the dialogue around a fear of 40B coming in. But I think that this is a goal of our community as a town-wide culture that we embrace and honor, and we really honestly want to increase diversity in our community.
Thank you. Dialogue as we address this issue. So grateful to you for coming. It's the Finance Committee. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. Appreciate it. Look forward to your deliberations in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, the next item we have on our agenda is a
Excuse me, Mr. Lawson, may I ask, are you going to entertain any questions from the people, or are you waiting for a public comment period?
Is that shorthand for I have a comment that I would like to make?
Well, you might say so, but I'm sure that there might be other people who are here who are very interested in the presentation, but who would also have questions. But if this is not appropriate, just tell me.
No, I have no problem. Let's try to keep them on point. This isn't a deliberation tonight. This was an update, so we're not in a position of trying to come to some particular judgment. But if there are comments that citizens would like to make, I think we should hear them now. So who's show me your hand if you have a comment you'd like to make. 1, 2, Dory, you have 2, all right?
Take the chair next to Phil and use the mic.
There's this purple chair which we reserved for a comment. Probably especially for the occasion. Who would like to come first? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Kara Stokes. I live at 20 Winthrop Street. Just wanted to touch on a couple just data points as it's been brought to you here, as notes have been, or conversations have been reiterated to make sure that they're on the record. I've been intimately involved. Clearly, I live on Winthrop Street, so this project is of great importance to me and directly does impact me and my children and my family. One thing that I did want to point out is that back in 2009, we did meet with the current CHDC at that time, and I believe Mike Maloof was the chair. And he had a lot of dialogue with the community, with the neighborhood directly, was incredibly helpful, very intentional about answering questions and making sure that we felt that we were really connected. At that time, there was a lot of questions sent, and I won't bore you with every single one of them, but there are about 15 pages here of information that he sent back to the community. There was a community organization called WinCom that we formed as a neighborhood because we did feel we wanted to be more organized and we could be represented at different meetings as we could go. And ultimately, what was decided at this point back in 2009 is we were brought to the table to say we want to put a development back there of 20 units of affordable housing. And so we went through all of these questions, and then we were told, it's really in the early stages, so just hold tight, you'll hear all about this information. About, I would say, not very long after that, CHDC reincorporated themselves and no longer posted any meeting minutes on the website for the town, and public was not allowed to come to any of their meetings. So it was very difficult for us as a community to try and get involved and understand the details of the projects that were, this project specifically, but even still projects for housing in general. The only way that we were able to go about that is to kind of play catch up, if you will. There would be something brought to a town meeting, or there would be information brought about, and then as a community we would hear about it because they'd be posted meeting minutes or an agenda. But things would already have been submitted and already been discussed by different boards in the city, or in the town, excuse me. So as a community, it was really difficult for us to reach out. There were many, I wouldn't say many, but there were definitely, we'll say informational meetings that were held. And there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of questions. But when it came to like planning board meetings or CPA meetings, we would go in and have questions, and those boards would say, well, this is really a question for this board, so you should go and see them. But their next meeting wasn't for another month, and it had already been discussed, and then we just felt very kind of pushed off, like we were always playing catch up. What Mr. Posner referred to as going out to the community and getting feedback about the family housing, how that wasn't acceptable, is because between the 20-unit time period and when the CHDC reincorporated, it went up to 210 units, and then it was getting larger. So of course, as a community, we were concerned because that does have a very large traffic impact. It does have a large impact on the schools. So just getting back to it, we really pushed hard, and it's been an interesting dynamic between the WinCom and the neighborhood, and trying to figure out how to receive the information, come to these meetings and be productive, because there's been a lot of hearsay back and forth. You know, the town doesn't, or the town wants X and the neighborhood doesn't, or this is about 40B and we have to do this. And there's no chance that anything can change. So just what I'm just trying to express to you, I guess, and try to understand is, if the CHDC is not able, which they were before, to abide by open meeting laws, how are we as a community supposed to be able to get input before the ball has really gone way down the road? I mean, now we're talking about millions of dollars of taxpayer money that we heard about through, proposals that we couldn't even be part of that conversation in the first place. We weren't aware of that. So I just want to understand, I guess, or maybe I really just don't have a question. I just want to bring that to light. I just want to make that known, that there have been conversations we've been trying to coordinate. It's been difficult. So is there a way that you, as the select board, can see where the community can be not quite on the defensive, or having to kind of chase after things and be more upfront in the group decision process from the beginning? Is that something that's possible?
Well, the short answer has to be yes. So the question is to let us know what we might do to help. We've had numerous conversations here in open session about this any number of times. The public money that is potentially available for this project will come before town meeting. It would come from an article that the select board would sponsor around the use of free cash. Mm-hmm. And the other would be, I don't think they've reached a final judgment yet, but with the Community Preservation Committee, all of those meetings are open to the public. It's been on the agenda, it's there, and I know it's been discussed. Mm-hmm. I don't think they've reached a final decision.
Well, today, they had their meeting today.
Is it tonight?
It was tonight, about an hour ago. Closed up.
I think Ms. Stokes has always been that all the neighborhood scheduled meetings, I mean, we've been there.
I've done my best. I'm only one person.
I always see you there. I think I get the feeling she just wants to be able to participate with the CHDC in like a working session of some kind, or more often, or at least on a regular basis.
That would be wonderful. I can also connect with you, send you an email on other recommendations that I might have.
I don't have that.
This email?
Page thing.
Okay,
I do,
I can forward that to you for sure.
So there's a lot of history to this as
There
well.
is.
Not only do you have to be an expert in housing, you gotta be a historian, because this has gone on, and I keep hearing bits and pieces as I'm trying to learn about it. But I think that, I guess the only thing I can say is I wouldn't let the frustration of the past kind of color trying to look at this project as just a project in and of itself, which you may have legitimate concerns about. And I do agree that, it's sometimes difficult to make your way through all the right committees and, what each committee has to be dealing with. It can be extremely confusing and frustrating. So thank you for your comments.
And I thank you guys also, because I understand, as time does go, there are new people that come in and move out. And like you said, it is hard to kind of get the clear picture. And I'm certainly not giving you a clear picture either. This is just one perspective.
But I think there's a lot of committees in town that each have a very explicit sets of responsibilities that they have to contend with. One of the things that makes the select board different is I think it is fundamentally our responsibility to ensure that every voice has a chance to be heard and be involved in decisions. And so I hope you and anybody else who feels like they haven't been heard or wants to be heard more knows where we live, and they shouldn't hesitate at all to be in contact with us. And I think my personal assurance is that's extremely important for me because we don't make good decisions if we don't hear from people. And I know the Housing Corporation is working very hard to, we met with Walter on a number of occasions, but I've also learned that independent of hard work and every bit of communication, there's still more that can be done, and the more we work hard on this, the better the decisions we're going to make. So please continue to be in touch and let us know if we can be helpful. Thank you for coming and thanks for your comments.
Oh, thank you very much for your time.
Sure.
Right. Jeff, you got, are you Tom? Did you want to say something?
I did.
Okay, you're out here in that door and then.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Peter Fulton. I'm at 31 Winthrop Street. Mr. McKean mentioned the historian here. I would consider myself the optimal historian on this parcel. I'm a retired 34-year firefighter in town here. So besides being on the street, numerous calls and visits to that site are my forte. And I'll remind everybody this was a dump site for the Department of Corrections. It was also the leaching field before they had a sewage disposal system. So I'll keep this brief, but hopefully concise. I heard who's the ownership of this property, some sort of a lease arrangement. So should a shovel go in the ground, who's going to be responsible for potential contamination here? And is the town liable for it? I ask you to consider that heavily. I would suspect, and I will on record suggest that you're going to run into heavy metals there, just because of the dumping considerations and evolutions that the Department of Corrections used. Animal waste goes on, and I don't mean biodegradable animal waste. I'm talking about hides, for example, from the prison farm, that kind of thing, which were unceremoniously dumped there. So there's a whole plethora of things there. That's just one consideration. I would ask Mr. Posner if he's the man to answer this about access. He suggests that he's approached the Department of Corrections about access. Ms. Stokes mentioned about these surprises that we see. Well, one perfect example of a surprise was, I've mentioned this time and time again, this is an Elm Street parcel. It's 895 Elm Street, which is the department, is the big house, as they say, it's MCI. This is a parcel that was portioned off from 895 Elm Street. And miraculously, the next map we see, it has a Winthrop Street designation. These are the types of end runs that are extremely frustrating. And who gives someone the blessing to do this? All of a sudden, it's a given that this is the access to this property. I would suggest to you that it's not the Department of Corrections that Mr. Posner has to approach, but the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail people. There's a full 3-width railroad right-of-way track bed that travels behind the homes on Commonwealth Ave that could be easily incorporated to be used as an access to this parcel. Easily. 3 railroad width wide, railroad bed widths wide. So that's 3-width freight trains which used to go through there. They went up to Wicks Lumber in Acton, which, as I moved in there, by the way, which was a condition of my employment to live in town. So I've been there for 36 years. I could take up a lot of your time here because I do have a tremendous history on this parcel. Mr. Posner has a different philosophy than Mr. Maloof, and it does involve more units. And I would suggest to you that it's an approach to, I don't know what it's approach to do, but I disagree with Mr. Grantham's, whatever the gentleman's name is, Walter, the parking, his parking tabulations. I think the staff that's going to take care of 110 people is going to be more than what 20 units of conventional housing would have brought. It's going to be a 3-shift type of facility. In other words, morning, evening, and overnight shift. 10 to 12 cars per shift times 2 trips each is going to be more than what this initial 20-unit proposal was all about. So again, I heard someone mention this fall, it was a nice day there where everybody was walking around, but Mr. Posner did not want to guide anybody to this visible service road that the correction system currently uses for access from Commonwealth Ave to this parcel. The town of Concord has routinely used it for snow dumping. So if they can get heavy machinery in there, trailer dumps, and that, by that I mean tractor trailers, for those who are not familiar with it, 18-wheelers, I suggest you can get a service road in there that will access this parcel. Again, I could go on and on. Thank you for my time, Ms. Keough.
I would encourage you, thank you for your comments, and I would also encourage you to make sure that somebody has your comments. Be so good to.
Well, this is on record, I presume? This is on records to the meeting minutes? Thank you. Okay, thank you.
I mean, I'm going to have to plead ignorance on the access question, but the other questions about parking that you mentioned, I would assume that coming before the planning board and the zoning board, these are factual questions that will need to be, in some sense, dealt with during that process. So I would encourage
Well,
you.
again, my first comment was about the contamination potential here, and I really ask you to be aware of that. We're all town taxpayers here, and it's going to become somebody's liability, and I understand it's a lease parcel, or if that was the term.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Dory, I think you're up next.
Good evening. Dory Keough, 51 MacArthur Road. And I have a couple of quick comments. One is that when there was what you discovered to be a funding gap, at that point, I'm not sure what was the cause of the funding gap. Did Grantham bid on a particular project and then find that it couldn't perform that project, or did they decide that there were changes to be made? And if there were a funding gap, and so Grantham said, we can't do this without the $3 million, which they've come to the town for, why did then not the CHDC rebid the project? And I don't have to get an answer, but I'd like you to consider that there could have been other options for this site. That's number one of my... Yes, my second point is that 40Bs are not necessarily the boogeyman that everybody here in town talks about. I've been in touch with housing development corporations almost identical to ours in Acton and in Wellesley, and talking with the chairs of those committees. And they've said what we do, and in fact what Wellesley is doing now, is we negotiate. And what I think Concord has done, I believe with Concord Muse, we were able to get more affordable housing because compromises were being made, according to Marcia, which is admirable. Wellesley right now is saying, yes, they're only at 6.5%, but she said, we want good placements, we want good situations. They're turning down a huge operation on Worcester Road, which is most of us call Route 9, because it's not suited for the town. And finally, 83 units of affordable housing in one spot is not diversity in this town. That's putting 83 affordable units in one place. And just the other night, we heard at town meeting the idea that the goal of Concord is to spread affordable units throughout the town. I don't think putting 83 in one place is exactly following that. So I think that we'd like to have your public meeting, and the West Concord Advisory Committee is a good idea, but I think we'd like to have the answers to why did you find you had this shortfall, and why, when Grantham could not perform what it had bid for against nobody really knows what, since again, just to quote what Ms. Stokes said, those CHDC meetings are not held in open session, unlike every other board and committee in this town, and unlike the way its original charter was set up in 2007. Somehow, over these intervening years, that has changed. And so now what's presented at these very excellent open meetings, public meetings at Harvey Wheeler, they are presenting a fait accompli. They're not saying, this is what we're thinking about, give us your input. So all of these things, I think, cause people in this town to say, yes, we want affordable housing, and we want it scattered throughout the town, but no place else in Concord has more than 42. I think that's Everett Gardens. Want you to think carefully about investing town money in something that there may not be town support for, and why there isn't town support for it. So thank you for your courtesy in listening to us.
All right, thank you very much. Tom, you have a remark?
Mr. Chairman, Tom Tarpey, 59 Westville Drive. I'm sorry to repeat, but I had essentially the same question that the last speaker said last, and that is there any overweening, not to be overly alliterative, is there any overweening public policy purpose that prevents the publication of minutes by this organization? I, in the course of our work, went on the website and saw that there haven't been minutes published since 2009, I think. And I just wonder, perhaps there's some legitimate reason for that. Maybe they need to operate in executive session all the time. I don't know. I just wondered.
So to answer that question, if you send me an email, if you send me an email, and if any member of the public sends me an email, we will send you minutes of every meeting since the CHDC has been incorporated.
So
It's not a
perhaps
problem.
that could be provided.
Why not post them?
Yeah.
Have the meetings open to start with.
We can invite members of the public. One of the issues that arises because of our unique nature, we are not like the planning board. We are not like the zoning board. We are an independent nonprofit that was incorporated by the town, and by virtue of the enabling legislation, we were specifically separated out from supervision or control by the Board of Selectmen. That was intentional, and it was intended to permit CHDC the kind of flexibility that we have to respond to the types of opportunities that come up for real estate development projects. But I understand that the perception is that somehow we operate in the dark and that we don't keep meetings. But the fact is, we don't keep meeting minutes. But in fact, we do keep meeting minutes, and we're certainly happy to share them with you and any member of the public that requests them. And so I think what we can do is post them. And, to try to address this issue, with respect to everybody, I'm a volunteer board member, but I'm happy to work with the town planning staff so that we can be as transparent as we can be.
If you need help, yeah.
Yep, we'll seek it and get it. No problem.
I can be accessible to everybody, not just those who ask.
Right, so we'll put them on, we do have a page on the town website, and we will try to, or I shouldn't say we will try to, we will post the meeting minutes, and we will post the historical minutes so that people will have access.
Yeah, and the meeting minutes I've reviewed correspond to the meetings that I've attended in person. I think it's a tough explanation to the public of why they should or shouldn't allow public participation, but a lot of the meeting minutes involve reviewing of grants, applications for, folks asking for funding, or there's a property for sale. So, you can't share that information because you're trying to see if you want to purchase a piece of property. So, we can talk about maybe there's a venue of public discussion
or redaction or something like that.
And then there may be some executive session.
So I think you've heard the comments, and I will trust that you'll do what you can to be more firm. We need to move on.
Excuse me, though, Mr. Lawson, I brought this up, and I appreciate what Mr. Pazzo is saying, but meeting minutes are ex post facto. I'm talking about people being able to sit in and listen, unless it's an executive session, for which minutes are always made available, as you do.
Your point was made.
But it's not just posting the minutes, it's posting the
I didn't
meetings.
say it was. I was just thanking Phil for his willingness to post the minutes.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Posen's explanation here sounds like they're an autonomous board. Is that what the selectmen's charge was to these folks?
Do I have it?
No, well, I'm asking for history. Mr. Ing is, are they an autonomous board that has no supervision?
They were set up specifically to have independence from the town. They're appointed by, the members are appointed by the select board, so that's the link, but they were to operate autonomously.
Well, I would disagree with that.
So,
I think that's a poor charter.
Since they're trying to,
Hold on.
It's a corporation. Right. Yep.
All right, hold on. We're not going to get into this matter tonight, but in addition, Mr. Posner, would you please post this document that you just handed to Mr.
Absolutely.
Whalen?
It's on the website.
All right. Well, thank you. Yet another issue that we're going to need a lot more conversation about to get it right. Mr. Hanian, Posner, thank you very much for coming. For everybody who came to participate, greatly appreciate it. Thanks very much. And Linda, you'll let us know when you're ready to take this up.
We will let you know.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks, guys.
Could you please go out into the hall if you're going to keyhole? You think so? All right. Next item on the agenda, request from the Concord Regional School District with respect to signs. So the regional school district proposed, I believe it was last January, new signs. New signs at the high school. And they went ahead with this process. In April, the town meeting enacted a new sign bylaw. Subsequent to the enacting of the new sign bylaw, the regional school district continued with this process for the signs. The sign bylaw changed the sign size restrictions by the town. And under the new bylaw that was passed at 2016 annual town meeting, signs proposed by the regional district no longer conform to the bylaw. Apparently, they were not aware of that, and they have proceeded and gone ahead with that. I had correspondence from Mr. Flaherty essentially asking the select board under paragraph 12A of the bylaw to declare the signs at the high school a town sign. And in so declaration, in making such a declaration, the town sign is exempt from the bylaw. We're not going to do that because, according to town council, the regional district is a governmental body, and therefore they don't need our approval to put the signs up on their property. Do I have that right, Mr.
Yep,
Whalen?
that's correct.
So we don't need to take any action. I will ask Mr. Whalen if he would let Mr. Flaherty know town council's view and opinion.
And I'll advise the building commissioner's office. I think that was perhaps where the start of the concern came, was that they didn't comply, but in fact they're exempt. So
Can you get out why they're exempt?
they're exempt because they're the definition section in our bylaw exempts governmental signs and specifically mentions U.S. government, Massachusetts government, or town government, and the regional school district is a political subdivision of the Commonwealth, so it's essentially a state agency.
So anything on a federal park or state park?
It's exempt from our signs.
As are our own sign. If it hadn't been the case that they were a state entity, the select board could have declared them a town sign and they would have been exempt, but we don't need to do that. Good for us.
So what of our other schools, because they would have been a part of the town?
The public schools are part of the town.
Right, exactly.
But my hope would be that going forward, both the regional district, the town, and the public schools would try to conform to the bylaw. Next item on the agenda, annual license renewals. You've been signing away. So we we have separate motions here. Mr. Ring, here's a motion.
I gotta read the whole thing?
Gotta do it.
All right, I move to approve the renewal of the following 12 all alcoholic beverages restaurant common victualers licenses to 42 Main Street's Market and Cafe, doing business as Main Street's Market and Cafe, 80 Thoreau LLC, doing business as 80 Thoreau, 99 Restaurants of Boston Incorporated, doing business as 99 Restaurant Pubs, Bondier Concord LLC, doing business as Bondier Concord, Qing Dynasty Incorporated, doing business as Asian Gourmet Sushi House, Concord Restaurant Group, doing business as Woods Hill Table, Boulder Incorporated, doing business as Vincenzo's Pasta, ML Restaurant Group Incorporated, doing business as Michael's Restaurant, Paparazzi Trattoria of Concord Incorporated, doing business as Paparazzi, Saltbox Kitchen LLC, doing business as Saltbox Kitchen, Tyson Incorporated, doing business as Chang An, and Trails and Cafe LLC, doing business as Trails and Cafe.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Now I'm hungry.
Yeah. It's tomorrow. May I ask,
I just wanted,
is there a more,
you could say for the 12 ones in the motions, you don't want to go through, but it's really everyone is renewing. There's one box,
So for the next motion could be to approve the 3 licenses listed.
Okay, I move to approve the renewal of the following 3 wine and malt restaurant common victular licenses.
is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Move to approve the renewal of the following 2 all alcoholic in-holder licenses listed.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
I move to approve the renewal of the following 2 all alcoholic club licenses listed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I move to approve the renewal of the following wine and malt club license listed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to approve the renewal of the following 5 all alcoholic retail package store licenses listed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to approve the renewal of the following 3 wine and malt retail package store licenses listed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Class 2 licenses. Move to approve the renewals of the following 11 Class 2 used car dealer licenses.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh boy, double-sided. Now I know why they said go. Common victualers licenses. Move to approve the renewal of the following 45 common victualers licenses listed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
In-holder licenses. Move to approve the renewal of the following 3 in-holder licenses listed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to approve the renewal of the following 2 lodging house licenses listed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to approve the renewal of the following 3 livery licenses listed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to approve the renewal of the following common carrier license.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to approve the renewal of the following weekday entertainment licenses listed.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Well done.
No.
Take the rest of the day off.
Is there a fee paying to find all these licenses?
Yes.
Sir?
So we should be flush with cash at the moment.
You could, yeah. No, I think it's, and if you haven't, all of these licenses are here with us this evening to be
Yes.
signed.
I didn't read each one, but I didn't see them.
Next item on our agenda is a recap of special town meeting.
Let's see, I mentioned earlier that the closing is taking place on the Balls Hill Road property, I believe on Wednesday. The pilot agreement for the solar panels is in place, and the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail easements, I think the The board has been granted the authority to place an easement on the town property. I don't know if we have to go actually to writing it up. That might take the Mass Highway when they're building the project. They may ask for a write-up and a model easement they want us to adopt. I don't think we've done it. You've done it for the West Concord parking lot. I don't think they've asked for those yet, but when the time comes, you've been authorized. So I don't know if there's any further follow-up.
Well, I think the moderator on her first town meeting
exceptional.
quite effectively and efficiently.
Well done.
Yes, indeed. So good practice for her. We take our challenges. We need to make it a little more challenging for her at the annual town meeting.
I have a hunch that won't be a problem.
I think you're right. All right, thank you. We have a few folks left. Any public comments?
No.
Good. This
Quiet
committee-
public.
No offense, good. Nevertheless, good.
None taken.
None taken. Committee liaison reports.
Somebody mentioned the CPA, or CPC is having their meeting, or been having their meetings, we've been having ours. And P3 had a couple to get prepared and try to get theirs coordinated. I think they found that they needed a little additional time to kind of edit it, but those were the two main groups.
Good, and my thanks to you for your good work on the public-private partnership
It was very
liaison.
educational, and you can see it's had a spillover in terms of the desire of input of citizens to have open meetings.
That was good.
And that's what democracy is.
Karen?
Yep. There were several NRC meetings, and in fact, one of the things that at some point we'll need to deal with is the fact that I have two conflicting committee responsibilities, the cemetery and NRC, and they always meet at the same time. So I feel I'm always in the position of choosing one over the other.
I suggest you negotiate with your fellow board members.
I plan to do that.
Looking at the dead.
Okay, well, there we go.
No more fun here tonight.
It's gotten a little quiet early in the morning with the Estabrook Woods Committee having wrestled its report together, although the Long Range Planning Committee continues to move forward, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the results of our consultant coming on board will be. I think that'll move us along. But other than that, smooth sailing.
I had the pleasure of attending the HATS meeting last week, where Colonel Hund, a new commander at the Hanscom Air Force Base, gave us a presentation. Amazing growth at the base. There's currently an unprecedented $500 million in construction projects ongoing on the base, and it's unprecedented amongst, from what he knows of Air Force bases and what they have going on.
Am I correct if we got additional excise tax fund revenue from the result of that, or I thought I saw somewhere that there was additional excise tax.
Excise tax, not property tax, but
That would have been from the airfield, not the airport.
That's the airfield.
Okay.
We get a jet fuel excise tax, but that's not from the Air Force Base.
Okay.
That's from the civilian airfield.
And, I think they're one step away from getting the land transfer to allow them to redo the Vandenberg Gate, so that there's a safer, more secure way of inspecting trucks coming in. So it lies with the Air Force now. The state's done its job. Thank you. And also one item that was raised, and the towns all mentioned kind of what's going on. Town of Bedford is buying the Coast Guard land, right behind the airfield on what road was that? There's like a naval. It's about 20 acres, I think.
and it's housing?
Yeah, and they have an RFP out to developers to.
The one that goes out to 4 and 225, it goes out the back gate.
No, it's by
The old ratio?
Yes. There's some property there with an old naval
Yeah, there's a base
structure there.
there.
So it's just interesting there.
Mhm.
They've got some growth there. So, that's it.
I didn't bring my notes, unfortunately, lucky for all of you. I just want to say the polystyrene committee held its public meeting this week, last week. It was not very well attended. It was well intended, but not well attended. Letters have gone out to all affected businesses, and I think by you, Chris, in the last couple of weeks. So businesses are aware that the bylaw goes into effect. We got some correspondence back from Deborah's and Crosby's, each telling us about the progress they've made towards meeting the polystyrene ban, and that they are expecting not to request very many waivers from products, but there's some sticky things they just can't meet yet.
Do we know how, say, the high school or the school system is doing, and whether also Emerson Hospital?
So we expect that there will be some requests for waivers. There are particular items like straws. There's some concern from the Meals on Wheels groups and Council on Aging about whether they can find substitutes that keep food warm for delivering hot meals if it's not a polystyrene product. So there'll be some sticky things and some exemptions that will be requested until at least for the first year, but it won't be a massive.
I guess one would hope that sort of town areas would be more in compliance perhaps than private corporations, that the school, something that they need to give a lot of attention to.
The school is making a great deal of headway. They have green teams at all the schools, I think, now that are working to finding replacement products. And the polystyrene committee has gone out with their big basket full of the replacement things to do an education outreach about here are some possible products. They even got some tested products. They brought in some straws that are a much harder material, like a wood-based cellulose kind of straw. They're a bit more expensive. Kind of cute. You can get them. You can get them branded with Concord if you want to. But they're sort of costly, so alternatives aren't readily available.
Is the feeling that this won't be too much of an imposition on the town to enforce?
Right, yes.
There'll be some.
Yep, there'll be some impact, but it's not as easy as the plastic bags, but it seems manageable. For, Rod Robinson and the solid waste folks.
Yeah, I attended, well, we both attended the historical commission, great group of people, great work, great hearing the progress of the archaeology project and what they're now at the cataloging stage after a successful spring.
I didn't want to bring that up with the Junction Village discussion. There was a large gathering of law enforcement there in 1859. Hundreds from all over the country, and they want to do some archaeological, I guess have done some, but want to do archaeological investigation of it.
I think Mr. Fulton has a great deal of information about it, I think.
Right.
We had a small little project over by the Barrett's Mill Farm, didn't we, a couple of years ago?
No, that's his project that they're reporting out on. It's not small, it's large.
National Park had a very successful one. Parker's Revenge, quite successful. It's surprising there's not more given this.
So I attended a few other meetings. And
I attended the Energy Futures Task Force. They're busy coming to terms with their report. Another committee that's full of hardworking people on our behalf. I represented the town at the Air Force Base annual event.
Thank you for doing that.
Colonel Ron, very nice man.
Great.
That's terrific. I'll just note for the record, we had a successful pre-annual meeting hearing on Saturday, December 3rd, where we heard from all the various committees about the warrant articles that are likely to be coming our way.
Those that we know of.
Those that we know of.
Any petition articles?
Nothing has arrived. There's someone interested in outdoor lighting.
That's right. We saw something.
All right, thank you. Miscellaneous correspondence. I have a copy of correspondence from John Flaherty to Diana Rigby about a budget issue with respect to the preschool that might impact on the current fiscal year budget, and some additional information about potential impacts on the fiscal 18 budget. the school committee is going to take these matters up. The issues were special education again, and then if the school committees decide, which they have not decided yet, the regional district decides to go with the late start time at the high school next year, that has fiscal impacts, particularly around the leasing and buying of buses. So the regional school committee and the school committee are meeting tomorrow night. They'll be taking these budget matters up under the discussion, and then at their meeting on the 20th, they will vote to decide whether to go forward with these actions. And the finance committee was also attended the meeting with me, and they will be bringing the matter to the attention of the finance committee at its meeting on Thursday. So
I saw that one issue had to do with cleanup of the trees after the tornado. Is there any insurance covered through that, or is that just?
No, trees down are not covered. Trees falling on buildings, the building damage is covered, but for trees just.
Trees, as I understand, will just kind of partially knocked down or damaged.
well, there were a number of issues that impacted. There was the trees, there was some unexpected additional sick leave that needed to be compensated for, but the big one was budget impacts on the preschool special education program. That was a large.
Inclusion.
Inclusion, yeah. And so they'll be taking that. So they had me come to the meeting, I think, so we would be informed.